Hey everyone, this is Vin-Decision, and we are talking Vin-Picks February 2023. 4 bottles as always. You can buy these via the link in the description below. It's 4 bottles for $99.99, so just under $100. And what we aim to do is deliver you the best quality for the price, for this price range. In my mind, $25 is that ideal golden mean that really allows for a lot of quality. A lot of producers are focusing on this range because they understand how many people can be introduced to their estates. So today, $25 is this kind of very competitive area, and that's what we focus on. So generally it's 2 white wines and 2 red wines. Sometimes when it's seasonal, I switch it up a bit, but this month, February, we have 2 white wines and 2 red wines. I'm gonna put some links below too, some educational links. So if you want to do your own research, it will make that easy. For instance, looking at different maps, which helps a lot, or just looking up some producer material. But know that all of these wines are not only capable of aging longer. So if you're building your own cellar, these are wines that are very much worthy of that cellar, but they're all ready to go too. And they're all meant to teach you something about the specific regions they come from. So we're starting off with Chablis, which is Domaine Berat. This is a smaller family in Chablis that has been around for quite some time. They focus on the essential, sort of what they call typical iteration of Chablis, and that means it is fresh, mineral, and saline. These are the qualities they're looking for. So as opposed to a Chardonnay, because remember, Chablis is Chardonnay, it's 100%, as opposed to a Chardonnay that is more tropical and sometimes more buttery, more heavy-bodied, Chablis is a wine that is very sleek. It is oftentimes very well balanced as well. And it's a wine that has lighter mouthfeel. So that is to say, if you are thinking about a heavier bodied white, this is the opposite of that. However, the vintage is 2020, and that's a rounder vintage. So it has those elements of a little bit of oomph mixed in with a lot of those refined, balanced characteristics. And that's good because the month we're in, a lot of the food fare you see can be a little bit on the heavier side. So this is a great wine to start your meal off. It's a wine that you can easily have on its own too. But Chablis, if you see this on a menu, if you're in a wine shop, Chablis is the wine that kind of gets you going. It is maybe my favorite region in the world, mainly because it is so transparent with its terroir. So terroir is this idea, in a nutshell, of the different soils and the different microclimates, and also really the tradition of winemaking in that specific region. All those things combine to leave an effect on the actual wine in the bottle. So the wine has its own personality and identity, and in my mind, the great wines of the world have that personality and identity because of the terroir. And so that's the wine's job, to showcase that. In this case, this Domaine Berat, you'll see that it is from Côte de l'Aché, and this is one of the most revered vineyards in Chablis. So Chablis is composed of all these different sites. Every single site, as we just said, with this idea of terroir, gives off a slightly different permutation, even if the grape, Chardonnay, is the same. Even if it's coming from the same winemaker, who has, let's say, all of these different plots, the wine should taste different. Côte de l'Aché performs at a very high level, often, year in and year out. A producer named Laurent Tribut that's kind of like sometimes even a unicorn bottling these days, has some vines there, but so does Domaine Berat. So the pedigree of this wine is quite high. So you're already walking into a really beautiful situation. If you're new to Burgundy, this is a great place to start. But if you are already a connoisseur or sophisticate, then this is something you are going to understand, and it's going to help you learn and dive even deeper into the region. So that's Domaine Berat. It's a Chablis Premier Cru, and it's from Côte de l'Aché 2020. The next wine that I'm very excited about is from Tyler. So this is from the West Coast, specifically California, and even more specifically, it's Santa Barbara. Tyler began in 2005, which is maybe just past the advent of new California wine, but very much the beginning of what we know as contemporary Santa Barbara. So Santa Barbara still was making wine before that. It kind of came in and out of favor, so that in my mind there was a bit of a dark period there. But with people like Justin Willett, who makes Tyler, people like Rajat Par, of course, and Sashi Morman, they really put the region on their backs and brought it to where it is today. To give you an idea of where it is today, winemakers from all over California are vying for different spots, really the privilege to make wine here, and they just can't at this point. There's no more room. And so Tyler and Justin Willett has been doing that for over 15 years now. I look to Tyler every single time, not only when I'm drinking for my own pleasure and bringing bottles home for friends and family, but it's always a great reference point of what Santa Barbara can be. The height of that vintage is always expressed through Tyler's bottlings. So we have a Chardonnay here, and it is not like your typical California Chardonnay. And I mean that in the best way too. I think simply because a lot of people have had a California Chardonnay that is buttery, that is very sometimes alcoholic, that is marked by vanilla, and a lot of these other flavors that really have nothing to do with Chardonnay as a grape. They have a lot to do with winemaking. So Chardonnay in California has been misunderstood for a long time. Today there are many winemakers doing a great job expressing the terroir, the unique terroir of California, and kind of backing off on the winemaking, letting the wines speak for themselves. Justin's been doing that for quite some time. And so his wines do have this sort of European classic bent to them. However, they are still a product of a place that's very near the sun. The sun is almost always out at some point of the day. And a product of, California wine. And that's great because California, Oregon, West Coast, North American wine in general is only getting better and better. And so it is important to show you some of these great winemakers that maybe you haven't tasted before, or maybe to reintroduce them to you. This wine, as you see on the back, is their Santa Barbara County bottling. And that is kind of, if you're more familiar with how Europe labels their wine, this would be kind of like their village. But what they do here is a lot of the wines that don't necessarily make a final blend for one reason or another, even though they're from all of his great vineyards, when you're figuring out what goes where, you tend to have some wine left over, and that's what Santa Barbara County bottlings are. So the juice inside is and should be actually priced much higher, but because it is this kind of village blend, what he's trying to do is give you a signature of the estate in a pretty easy way. So the wine is performing extremely high, but the price is very fair. As I said at the beginning, these are wines that can exist in your cellar, and this is certainly one of them. I love watching the Santa Barbara County bottlings kind of age and become more mature because they are really lovely wines. There's a lot of energy in them. There's a lot of chiseled kind of mineral components amongst the fruit. This is the 2021, and it's a phenomenal vintage already. The first time I opened this, I was really pleasantly surprised. A nice kind of like smoky, reductive note that is blended well with the fruit. He kind of nailed this vintage, and I'm sure it's only going to get better. The next two bottles are from Italy. We don't always do that, but sometimes I am a little bit influenced by what's available at the moment because wines come and go in a really crazy way, and it's hard to predict that. So my main goal and impetus behind every single monthly Vin-Picks is quality and the best I can find. So this month we have two red wines that come from Italy. However, they're really from opposite parts of the country. So to begin with, we have Calabretta. This is from Sicily and specifically Mount Etna. I remember Calabretta as I was a young novice, however many years ago that was, actually maybe a decade at least, this point. I remember Calabretta being one of these wines that I was following, and I was allured by, I was enamored by. I think I was in Astor, maybe Chamber Street. And I was the first time I opened this wine, I was like, holy moly, there are so many things coming out of this wine that are totally unique. A smokiness that very much is a part of volcanic wines, because remember, Mount Etna is a volcano. There is a savory component here that's really interesting, and I think I do remember this distinctly, that this was one of the estates that taught me about what savory means in a red wine, because that sounds strange if you haven't experienced it before. But there is a savory umami quality here amongst a bright, luscious fruit. It's Nerello Mascalese. That is the grape that's indigenous here. This one's 100%, and this is a fun bottling because they only make 1,500. Not 1,500 cases, 1,500 bottles. That's nothing. And so the wine kind of grows up in this kind of passion special project. This one is 2018, so it has a little bit of age on it already. And what Nerello Mascalese does is, despite some of those kind of savory, animal, really alluring qualities and kind of wild qualities, it has a delicacy and elegance that slowly come to the forefront as it becomes more and more mature. I do think that decanting your red wines from Italy is always smart. I nearly say that across the board, not even looking at where the wine's coming from or who the producer is or even the vintage. I think Italian red wines tend to do very well with more oxygen, which is what the decanting process does. It opens them up. Often it kind of balances them off, kind of makes those edges a little bit more soft. So if you're enjoying this and you have a decanter around, make use of it. If you do that, decant it about at least 30 minutes ahead of time. Because if you were just to throw it in a decanter, then pour right away, not much really happened in that moment. Maybe you got some SO2 that was trapped in there, sure, but give it a little bit of time and then see what happens. Always, though, for red wines, open your wines ahead of time, even if you're not decanting. You need to let the wine breathe to become acclimated with the new environment, because it was kind of trapped in this bottle. Now you're introducing all of these new elements, so let the wine breathe. So if you or your partner or your friend or whomever is beginning a meal at your house, let's say, that beginning moment is a wonderful time to open your red wine, because by the time you start pouring, it would have already unraveled a bit. White wines too need breathing time as well. Remember, they can be just as complex as red wines, sometimes even more. So don't shy away from opening those early either. The last wine we have for this month, it comes from Barbaresco, which is kind of wild. Barbaresco is not an easy region to have in a kind of value-driven monthly program like Vin-Picks. Because the wines are expensive. They're sought after, the demand is high. There's a lot of work that goes into this. The aging process is much different than a lot of different regions in the world. And so they can command a higher price point. Normally, Barbaresco starts around like 35 or 40 on the very low end, and it can go up to 100 pretty quickly. So it's kind of a privilege to add this. And so that's why I stepped on the gas to put it in. This is a smaller producer, even though I think now they are becoming much bigger. Adriano, Marco e Vittorio. You'll see it here. You may have never heard of them. If you haven't, do a quick Google search and search Karen O'Keefe, who is a brilliant wine writer, and see what she has to say about this. She's been championing them for over a decade easily, and has always given them high scores. I think she gave this 2019 a 94, 95, which is a phenomenal score, if you care about those, which I don't. But she's been writing about them for quite some time because they caught her attention. She is someone who's on the ground, who's tasting a lot of these different places, even if they're smaller compared to the well-known houses. And so it was my first introduction, were her words. And so I followed them and was so pleasantly surprised when I first tasted these wines. This is a 2019, and I recently went to a Piedmont tasting. So this Barbaresco is in Piedmont. I went to a Piedmont tasting, and a lot of 18s and 19s were showing side by side. I do love 18s from Piedmont, even though I think they don't get a ton of love. They are maybe ready immediately, very friendly out the gates. I think that's a great quality. The 19s are a little bit more austere, but for wine lovers, in the best way. They are classically defined. That means they are not sort of blousy, and they're not kind of wandering with their different notes and flavors. They are very, very specific, and it is a lovely, lovely structure. It lasts on the palate for minutes on end, and you can taste a little bit of this kind of cool, what I describe it as a cool nature to the wine. That's opposed to, let's say when you drink a red wine, you can taste the alcohol. You can taste kind of like how powerful it is. Well, when these classic vintages come around, you taste the opposite of that. You taste this kind of idea, you taste a unity, like everything's together, nothing is really out of joint. That is what this wine is in a nutshell. I love these wines. I can't wait to hoard cases of them in my own collection because the price is right, and they do age and can last at least 2 or 3 decades, which is wild. For we're looking at around $25 a bottle again. With just like with the Calabretta, you want to decant this wine, maybe even more so. For one, it's a year younger. That means it's going to be a little bit more fresh and vivacious, maybe a touch more rambunctious in the best way. But decant this wine. A lot of Barolo lovers and Barbaresco lovers, and really the grape Nebbiolo here, Nebbiolo lovers, will decant their bottles hours in advance, sometimes even half days or even 24 hours in advance, because there are some lunatics in wine. You don't need to do that, but think about if you want to experiment it, decant the wine an hour or two ahead of time. It's only going to open up the wine and make it more complex, more complicated. You're going to taste more from it. And so mess around. No matter what you do to it, make sure you're serving your red wines with a slight chill. If you're serving your red wine at room temperature, especially a wine, let's say from Piedmont, you're mainly going to notice the tannin, the alcohol, some of the parts that are a little bit harsh. You don't want to taste that, or just taste only that. You want to taste everything. So a slight chill, 10 or 15 minutes in the fridge, if you don't have a wine fridge, will do the trick, and it will make the wine more fresh. It'll make it a little bit easier to drink, more palatable, more enjoyable. And that's the point. So we have 4 bottles in February. The link is below if you haven't ordered them already. If you did already order them, this tutorial is just to give you an idea of what you're getting into. We have a Chablis from Domaine Barrat, which is from Côte de Lachey 2020. We have Tyler Santa Barbara County Chardonnay from 2021, and that's from California. We have a red wine from Etna Rosso, and that's the Calabretta. And the cuvee is called Sarah. It's 2018. And then we have a Barbaresco to end it from Vittorio, and it is 2019. All of these wines very much are going to impress you, I promise. Respond with any questions, any comments below. We're happy to hear them and respond back if you like. And also know these wines are so well made that if you don't finish them all at once, or one at a time, but you open it and in one kind of night, you do not need to finish these in that manner. That is to say, if you want 2 glasses one night and save 2 glasses for another night, you can do that because these wines can stand up to that. Not all wines can do that. A lot of wines will fall apart because they're not made well, because there's additives in there, because there's other stuff in there that's manipulating how the wine's going to evolve. Not these wines. So if you wanted 2 glasses one night, what you'd open your Chablis, pour the 2 glasses, put the cork back in the bottle, that's a big part, and put it back in your fridge. Same thing with the red wine. Put the red wine in your fridge overnight. Do not leave it on your countertop because it's going to evolve more quickly. Just like fruit, if you were to cut an apple, you leave it on the countertop, a few hours pass, it's a very brown item. Wine kind of has that same relationship with air. So make sure you put it in the fridge. If you don't finish it, come back to it in a few days and it's still going to be interesting. Will it have changed? Yes, but probably changed for the better. Sometimes these wines get even better the longer they're open. Well, thank you for your attention. Be sure to follow Vin-Picks. My own account is on Instagram. It's called @Vin-Decision, all one word. And we hope you like this. Cheers.